Hello. So today we're going to be talking about chapter 3. And the title of chapter 3 is Perceiving Others. So, what does that mean? Well, there's a lot in how we are perceived and how we perceive others and how others perceive us. So, I want you to just think about these three things, okay? And they're going to take into account, and you'll think about those as we're going through your book. One, if you had to give one word to how you perceive yourself, think about it now, jot it down. How do I perceive myself? Next, how do others perceive me? One word. Third, how do you want to be perceived? So when we're talking in this chapter, and you're taking this class because you want an in-depth understanding of how you communicate effectively with one other person. And again, we understand interpersonal relationships. So whether we're talking with friends or family or in the workplace, we want to understand, how do I perceive myself? Maybe you want two words: in the workplace environment. How do I want to be perceived in the workplace environment? So these three avenues, how you perceive yourself, how others perceive you, and how you want to be perceived, are your guidelines in understanding what this chapter has to offer. So I'm going to share my screen with our PowerPoints from our textbook, and they're going to identify some important aspects of perception. Firstly, we want to understand that perception is the process of selecting and organizing and interpreting information from our senses. So however I perceive according to the five senses. If you were growing up and you came home from school and there was homemade cookie smell, that's going to stay with you as the difference between going to school and coming home. And you're going to perceive that for a while. So when you go to a candle shop, it might remind you of growing up and having sweet smells of cinnamon and things like that. The same as sounds. And that's what we're going to investigate, how we interpret based on our five senses. So when we take a look at this is, and we're going to go through it one by one. I'm going to go back to the definition for a moment. The process. So anytime you see the word process, you know it's a step by step. So when we take a look at this model, it's showing you all the different steps we go through for perception to be understood to us. So the first step is selection. And we're going to go over these: selection, organization, response, and interpretation. And these are the steps that are identified as we go along. And we may go back to the picture. So selection, focusing our attention on certain sights, sounds, tastes, touches, or smells in the environment. So here, as I said, you may have a reference to chocolate chip cookie smells, or some sweet smell, or some loud sound, or a siren. And the next time you hear that sound, you're focused because you've heard it before. And what this next word means is salience, to the degree to which something is noticeable and significant to us. So how salient is it? So if you're driving a car and you hear a beeping noise from a horn, that's salient because it evokes, you've selected to hear that noise means that somebody's coming in your lane, or you're going in somebody else's lane, or something of importance that you have to be aware of while you're driving. So some people can walk into a room, never been in that room before, and then 1 minute later, I'll ask you what's in the room, and you could be salient to everything. Notice and retain everything. And some people, what color was the wall? Gray, white, cream. So that's not salient to you. So in our everyday life, our sights and sounds and tastes and touch and smells, our five senses, some are more salient. They're more noticeable to us. So back to the next step is organization. So selection, we focus our attention on certain sights and sounds, and now we're going into organization. So the organization is the structuring selected information into a coherent pattern. So it's structuring the selected information into some kind of pattern. So when you smell cinnamon, the pattern is that it's going to bring about kindness, tasty, pleasurable, as compared to some other sights or sounds or tastes or smells that might be pungent, or and then you'll remember that as not being pleasurable. So this next word, punctuation, is in English, with the periods and the commas. But what punctuation is structuring information into a chronological sequence that matches how you experience the orders. So punctuation is not only is that smell or that sight or that sound going to remind you of something, but it takes you back to, oh, first I smell this, and then I know I'm going to have a cinnamon chocolate chip cookies. So it brings you into a pattern. And that's where your marketing, and that's some of you are taking this class because of marketing. When you go to a candle factory, they reproduce smells that people, evokes pleasure. So whether it's that baking smell or a clear, fresh linen smell. So that's structuring information. I did this first, then this happened, then the next. So certain sights, sounds, tastes, smells will have punctuation. They're taking you back and having you remember things in the event in an order. Okay, so the next one is interpretation. So around the wheel, assigning meaning to selected information. So this is how we store. They store in mental structures called schemata. Schemata, mental structures containing information that defines concepts, characteristics, and interrelationships. So assigning meaning to selected information. Again, I assigned a meaning of pleasure. Maybe I had a lemon at a very young age and I didn't appreciate it, and I'm going to retain that as a mental structure, a schemata that lemons were distasteful. So we do have our little computers, and they store all of these mental structures called schemata. Okay, and we have gone through 3 of the steps. So I'm going to go back to the wheel. So we know what selection is, we organize the information, and we interpret it. So now let's take a look at how do we respond to it. We learned what punctuation means, schemata, and now attributions. Explanations for others' comments or behaviors. Sometimes we respond because of how we perceived it, but it might not be accurate. It's only accurate to what we know, because what we have perceived. So internal attributions presume internal causes, character or personality, whereas external attributions presume causes unrelated to personal qualities. So you were planning a lunch with your friend and you're waiting at the diner, and your friend is late, but your friend finally arrives half an hour late. So, internal attribution, you would say, oh, this person's never on time, doesn't care about me. External, there may be traffic, and that's why this person is late. So, how many times are you perceiving something not the way it's supposed to be because of internal attributions? And we usually go there first rather than the external attributions, which are more likely. So identify, think, write in a journal, take notes now. How many times did you blame somebody and say nasty things when it was perhaps an external attribution? So attributions explain or explanations for others' comments or behaviors. So I can attribute you taking this class because you're interested in working on interpersonal communication skills for proficiency.